Good morning from WKYT News, and we welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. I'm Bill Bryant, and we're glad you're here. A little bit later, what's there to see and do in Kentucky in the spring? State Tourism Commissioner Kristen Branscombe will talk about some options for spring break and the busy Derby season ahead, which is very important to Kentucky's economy. That's coming up shortly. But first, a healthy discussion about education in the Commonwealth. Where do things stand, and where are we headed? The Pritchard Committee for Academic Excellence has pushed hard for improvements in education at every level in Kentucky now for decades. Our state has seen significant improvements since the committee was formed in the early 1980s. There are always forks in the road, and the state could be at one of those right now as the state is looking to improve things under very heavy financial stress. Bridget Blum-Ramsey has a passion for educational excellence and public policy, and she is Executive Director of the Pritchard Committee, and we really appreciate you coming in today. I said I was going to be up front. We could have people here obviously yelling about pensions and all of that and do a show like that, but we've sort of had those already this year. Let's take a different view, and we'll do that as we have our discussion this morning. First of all, tell us about the Pritchard Committee's commitment to improving education and why that may be more relevant right now than ever.
So the Pritchard Committee, as you mentioned, was formed in the early 1980s. So we've been around for 35 years now, over 35 years. And we're a group of citizens, 100+ citizens across the state with a commitment to improving education at all levels, early childhood through post-secondary. And we've been working on that now for a generation. What we see is that we've come from the bottom of the national rankings to the middle in that time period. And as you mentioned, it's now more important than ever that we make the next giant leap from the middle to the top tier of all states.
Do you think we have enough advocates for education in Kentucky?
No. I think we need more advocates for quality public education in Kentucky, and advocates not only at the state level but at the local level to ensure each and every student has the opportunity to achieve at the highest levels.
So this pension issue has been very difficult. As you know, there's a bill that moved quickly through the legislature on Friday. There were teachers who did not show up, and many schools were closed, and this is kind of where we stand heading into spring break for many schools, and we'll see what kind of potential cooling off period this is or where this all goes. But you said really this is all part of a larger debate about teacher compensation.
It is. You know, the changes that we see that were passed through the House and the Senate last night, and we're all anxiously awaiting the bill to actually analyze it, but what we see is that the changes will most significantly impact future teachers, so those yet to enter the profession. And if the changes are such that we're shifting compensation to the front end as opposed to deferred compensation on the back end, then we really need to look at adequate and competitive salaries that attract dedicated and talented professionals to the teaching workforce.
And by that you mean if we're going to this hybrid cash
exactly.
balance type of system,
yes,
then maybe the new teachers can't count on that guaranteed pension that the older teachers have secured.
Exactly, and then they need wages that allow them to invest, yes, in that cash hybrid plan, but also in their own retirement plan. So they need wages up front, and we need to have that discussion as a state.
Do you have concerns that we'll have difficulty getting good qualified teachers to stay in Kentucky and teach?
Absolutely. We have concerns about that for two reasons. One, because of compensation. The fact that Social Security hasn't been on the table for teachers to access Social Security as the national safety net is a drawback for attracting future teachers. Compensation is a drawback. And then the current, I guess, tension in the environment is certainly a signal to individuals in high school right now that this may not be a career path for them. And so we need to kind of reaffirm, I think, public confidence in public education and support and respect for our teachers.
Tough things have been said in recent weeks.
Yes, absolutely.
Did that become counterproductive in your view?
I think it has become counterproductive, certainly. We need to debate things. That's part of our process in Kentucky and certainly in the United States, but we need to debate them with respect and support. And teachers especially are the ones who have the greatest impact on our students through the education years. And so supporting them, respecting them at this time and in the future is going to be important for that confidence.
How does Kentucky come to grips with with its budget situation. You know, we sit here and apparently early this week there's going to be a budget proposal maybe put forth, maybe passed. If not, one is required to be put into in place by April 13th as the Constitution requires. But we sit in a nation that's increasingly prosperous with improvements in the economy, but we have these profound budget problems here. Now, this week, Georgia's Republican governor and legislature arrived at the decision to put about $10 billion into K through 12 education, to add that. How concerned are you that Kentucky will lose momentum and will lose its placing among the states?
I think that's the single biggest issue for our legislators in the next few days, is ensuring that we increase, deepen investment in education as we move forward, and that we don't allow ourselves to rest on a plateau of academic progress or a plateau or disinvestment in education. So to your point, Georgia is deepening investment, Tennessee is deepening investment in education, Ohio is. So surrounding states are recognizing investment in education as the engine for economic development.
What would you have lawmakers consider as they consider the budget in the coming days?
I think what we've heard from lawmakers is there's an interest in looking at revenue positive tax reform, and we believe that's critically important if we're going to continue to move forward in education.
We mentioned that you deal with education at all levels, K through 12 as well as higher education. The public universities in Kentucky have had 10 straight years of cuts into their funding. Many of the regional universities at this point are eliminating programs and cutting staffs and faculty members. The Chronicle on Higher Education says that 30 other states are managing to increase their commitment to higher education at this time. That's a matter of priorities, isn't it?
Well, a college education is more important than ever for our young people, and we have more young people who are ready to be successful in higher education. Yet at the same time, we're disinvesting in a way that is requiring our post-secondary institutions to contract, and we're also shifting costs to students. So students, families bear over 50% of the cost of higher education now, at a time when it's increasingly important for them to receive those degrees and credentials. So if we don't deepen our investment in post-secondary education and ensure affordability for our young people, Kentucky will certainly lose ground when it comes to economic competitiveness. We
have this new formula of funding that will be applied to the universities. Would you say it is going to be more difficult for the regional universities to meet their targets than maybe what has been set out for UK and Louisville?
Well, I think we have to, I think we really need to evaluate the performance-based funding model as we move forward in the next few years to ensure that we are supporting students with that model and that universities are able to hit those marks while supporting students. And that's a big question right now. We're very supportive of the performance-based funding model, but we want to ensure that it doesn't discount students from low-income backgrounds or students who are traditionally underserved in some way. And I think that's the question mark right now that we need to keep an eye on.
Some have questioned, you know, is it counterintuitive to cut higher education, which, as you said, is what creates higher paying jobs and more money, therefore, paid back into the state government in the form of taxes?
Exactly. So the University of Kentucky's Center for Budget and Economics Research recently produced a study that found that annually the state would receive $903 million in additional tax revenue and cost savings if we were to increase post-secondary attainment to the national level. So that's not a far reach to just increase Kentucky's post-secondary attainment to the national level. And we're looking at about $1 billion annually into the state general fund.
And that does that by creating more people with degrees?
Exactly, yes. So more people with degrees results in higher revenue into the general fund, allowing us to, in turn, then invest in education to continue that forward progress.
So if that's the case, I mean, if that's true, if that is to be believed, what is the disconnect?
Well, I think the disconnect is that revenues fall short right now. The governor had to announce a cut to current year revenues because of a tax revenue shortfall. of $150 million. So our structure has not been keeping up with the pace of progress, and so we're not bringing revenue into the general fund that allows us to invest. So if legislators don't deal with those structural issues, we're going to be having this debate every single budget session, and we're going to be cutting in between budget sessions.
There is a bill that has provisions for public funding of charter schools. What would it do? How much of a future do charter schools have in Kentucky?
Well, charter enabling legislation passed in the General Assembly in the last session, and the budget bill that we see right now, or the funding bill that we see right now for charters, would direct the local district to basically pass the per pupil funding from the local district to the charter that's in the local district. So charters would receive roughly the same amount of money that the traditional public school district receives for a student now, less about $1,500 to $2,000.
Do you, as you look at the landscape for charters, do you see public schools converting to charters? Do you see for-profit organizations running charters? I mean, where are we going?
We don't see for-profit organizations running charters. We haven't, honestly, we haven't heard a lot of interest in charters right now, and what we are hearing is that the national charters that have a strong track record of success aren't interested in Kentucky at the moment for a variety of reasons, funding being one. But there may be other organizations in the state, nonprofits, who have an interest in moving in that direction. Our encouragement is that local boards of education will be that first authorizer and will ensure that any charter that sets up in a local community serves the overall purpose of the local district to increase academic achievement for students.
Well, with Bridget Ramsey of the Pritchard Committee for Academic Excellence, more questions, safety and security at schools among them when we come back, and then later we'll be visiting with Kentucky's Commissioner of Tourism, Kristen Branscombe. Things to see and do in Kentucky this spring. We'll be right back. Welcome back. It's WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. We're visiting with Bridget Ramsey, who is with the Pritchard Committee for Academic Excellence. We're talking about schools in Kentucky and kind of having a calm conversation in the middle of a lot that's going on in the legislature and with teachers and so forth, and a lot of folks with a lot of angst right now, just trying to figure out the way forward. But how are we doing with our academic outcomes as compared to others right now in the state?
We've made tremendous progress, Bill. Since the 1990s, Kentucky has climbed from the bottom of the national rankings to the middle, at the same time that Massachusetts entered a reform phase and was at the middle of the national rankings and is now at the top. So we believe we can make it to the top, but we need to focus on what we've been doing well and what we haven't done so well. One thing we've done really well is in the area of reading. Kentucky ranks 8th nationally in reading performance for elementary school students, but behind that ranking, we're leaving 44% of our third graders behind, not reading at a proficient level, and 51% of our third graders behind in math. So we need to strengthen our performance in those areas and other areas as well. But the fact that we've come from the bottom to the middle means that improvement is still possible, and we can make it from the middle to the top.
Represents progress, but at the same time shows you where you need to be. Other metrics as you look at Kentucky right now and where we are, dropout rate significantly better than it was some years ago. Right?
Our graduation rate is in the top 10 in the nation, above 90%. But again, behind that number, we know that a high school graduation is necessary but not sufficient for our young people to be successful in a career. So what we find is that 60%, roughly 65% of our students are actually college and career ready. So 35% are not really ready to go on past high school. And that's the problem that we need to fix as we move forward.
Safety and security in schools, a rather obvious priority right now with the shootings that we've had, other problems, and of course threats here in Kentucky that have been an issue. Do you expect the effort to try to make schools to be sustained after what we saw this year in Parkland, Florida, as well as in Western Kentucky?
If our student voice team has anything to say about it, the effort will be sustained. And I think we're seeing that nationally, that students are really standing up and saying, these are the places where we spend the majority of our waking hours. We don't feel safe. For a variety of reasons, we don't feel safe. We don't feel supported socially and emotionally. We need mental health services. We need less access to guns to feel safe. We need to have courageous conversations about what students are experiencing in schools today. And so I hope for that reason the conversation is sustained over the longer haul. And we do really work with students to ensure that they feel safe, just as I'm sure each one of us did when we were growing up in school.
There are lots of different kinds of discussions about this going on right now in terms of how to approach it, but you're encouraged that the discussions are being held.
We are very encouraged and proud of the students who are standing up for how they feel in school today.
How can people find out more about the work of the Pritchard Committee and what you do, and do you invite people to, in fact, become involved?
Yes, absolutely. You can find us on the internet, of course, at the pritchardcommittee.org, pritchardcommittee.org. All sorts of resources, reports, tracking of our progress from 2008 to now. You can find us on typical social media channels as well. And we invite conversation through all different sorts of channels. We have an annual meeting. We have a parent summit coming up April 28th, and would love to have folks come out for that summit to support parents as leaders in their own school districts.
And I know you've made the point, it's okay to disagree on matters.
It's okay
but have
to disagree.
Good civil discourse,
exactly,
right?
Yes.
And hopefully
yes.
that's what we have going forward.
Yes, let's hope.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank
we
you.
appreciate it very much. And we hope you'll stay with us on WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. Kentucky Tourism Commissioner Kristen Branscombe coming up next, talking about some ideas for seeing our beautiful state and about the huge impact of the Kentucky Derby. We're back in a moment. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers, and we're glad you're with us today. As the old Beatles song goes, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter, but here comes the sun, hopefully, right? Keeneland opens up later this week. The Derby Festival is about to roll, and the eyes of the world will be on the Commonwealth in the weeks ahead. But you may want to get out and see our beautiful state as well this spring. Kristen Branscombe is Kentucky's Tourism Commissioner, and she is joining us this morning. Always good to have you. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
Appreciate it. You know, first of all, is there something to being, you know, in the house all winter long and unable to go because it's so cold and snowy and people are just sort of pent up to get out there?
Well, I think we've seen those little brief moments of good weather we've had over the winter when everybody's out in their yards or walking the sidewalks to get a little fresh air. I think from a tourism perspective, it's going to be a wonderful spring, and we're going to look at this weird and wacky winter weather as a positive to get out and explore Kentucky.
A little marketing magic in the weather, right?
That's right. I'll take credit for it.
Now, let's talk about the business of tourism first. How important is tourism to Kentucky's economy?
Tourism in Kentucky is a $14.5 billion industry, and it's the third largest industry, revenue generating industry in Kentucky, behind automobile and healthcare. You know, we have such wonderful natural beauty, great people, great things to do. So we really drive a lot of our tax revenues and just the general economy in Kentucky. $1.52 billion in taxes is what the tourism industry brings to the state. So not only are we creators of great memories, good feelings, good times, but also really a big economic driver for the state and something that we all need and look for. And
employs people directly and indirectly, right?
Right. So, you have the direct employment in the state, that your front desk clerks, maybe the folks that are, cleaning your guest rooms, but you also have those secondary and indirect jobs that you'll see. It could be how many people that you have to hire in the waitresses in a restaurant because all the tourists are coming in, and you need to up your staffing. So there's a lot of things that tourism does that we may just kind of take for granted in our daily lives.
And how do we market Kentucky? What message are we selling out there? And I understand that's kind of being tweaked even now.
Yeah.
So what really do we want folks to know about Kentucky if they may be planning or even thinking about a visit?
Kentucky, it depends on if you're, marketing in-state, out-of-state, or internationally. But Kentucky, I think, is just a surprise to people. A lot of times as Kentuckians, we think that maybe people have a bad perception of us as a state, and sometimes there's no perception of us at all. But when they come to Kentucky, they are so surprised, and they fall in love with Kentucky and Kentuckians. And we're getting research back now that says that people's perceptions of Kentucky may be a little low or right in the middle, but as soon as they come and they take a trip here in visitation, they want to maybe buy a second home here, move here, start a business here, send their kids to school here. So tourism is also a great tool for economic development as well. But our messaging, I think we are the most authentic state in America. If you want a true Americana experience and you want a diversity of things to do, you just have to come to Kentucky. You can spend a whole month in Kentucky. You can go from east to west, north to south. I mean, you can go to flatlands, to mountains, to lakes, to more urban populated centers at Louisville, the rolling hills of the bluegrass and the horses. So there are so many things you could do in Kentucky that I don't think you need to go anywhere else.
Where do most of our visitors come from?
We are a drive destination. 75% of the U.S. population is at a day's drive of Kentucky. So we have a lot of people that, in Chicago's a great market for us. You think about the cement, the big buildings, and they get out to Kentucky to get outdoors, get some of that fresh air. And one thing, Bill, that really surprises me is we did a focus group in Chicago. They were so just enamored with the fact that we can see the stars, that we can see the night sky. And those are things that we're finding that we can market and tweak our messaging to those city dwellers that don't get out.
Things that we take for granted, right?
Yes, the things that we certainly love.
We have increasingly taken advantage of some of our signature industries like bourbon. More and more, even moonshine, we're hearing
legal.
Maybe legalizing, and some of the beginnings of that, and some of our communities beginning to take advantage of that. Are we sort of just beginning to embrace who we are, and that sells just fine?
I believe you've hit the nail on the head. We're just starting to embrace the bourbon culture. And I think that's the most important selling point from the state perspective, that it's just not all about the alcohol or the drink. And a lot of these distilleries are, generational. Families have had them forever, and people that work at the distilleries, their grandparents started there, and now they work there. So it's about that, again, going back to that family atmosphere, and it's kind of weird to say that about a bourbon distillery, but each one of our distilleries are so different. And you can literally go to all of them and have a different experience. I think it's very important to say, as Kentuckians, we're like, okay, bourbon, we talk about it all the time. But from a national and international perspective, we've only just begun to put our flag into that bourbon culture, and for people to automatically associate Kentucky with bourbon. And I think it's important, especially from the state perspective, that we keep off other states from assuming whiskey a little too much, and for taking what I think is rightfully ours.
Well, and some of the bourbon makers are on edge about the potential for retaliatory tariffs as well as we export it. And I know that's sort of not your department, but it's another area of concern that I know is out there.
Yeah, I think for our industry, it's certainly a concern. When you have something like those tariffs, that could negatively impact our bourbon industry, which affects our tourism industry, which affects jobs in Kentucky. So I think it's something that everyone should be really cognizant of, because the ripple effect of what those tariffs could do to all of us in the Commonwealth could be a real hard hit.
A lot of Kentuckians have this coming week off. It's spring break for a lot of our schools. Do you have any good day trips that you would suggest for them?
Yeah, I think that, everybody's ready for spring, and hopefully spring break brings that good weather. But, we're starting to get some of the wildflowers are starting to pop. So a lot of our state parks have, trail events that you can go out and get out, all different, I guess you could say, expertise levels, whether you want to get out with your kids or you're a little bit more advanced. So there's a lot of outdoor activities. The great thing that I love is, old friends over in Georgetown, going to see the horses, and I call it the Golden Girls Village for retired horses. So you can get to see that, the horse park. But, if the weather happens to not be great over spring break, the cave systems, I just think that is something that, even if you've been to Mammoth Cave, I mean, we went when we were in 4th grade, that was the mandatory trip. But there's so many different cave tours now, and things to do, and different experiences that, go to the caves over, Mammoth Cave, or some of those in South Central Kentucky, or in Louisville. They have mega caverns. You can zip line in the cave, go, I think it's mountain bike riding, kind of like some little tracks in there. So there's ways to get out of the weather. Outdoor
tourism, is that really an area of growth as we move into the warmer months ahead?
Yes, outdoor adventure, that we say outdoor tourism, which could be anything from very easy adventure to those that are rock climbing over in Red River Gorge. It is a huge economic driver for us, again, because I think that if any state in the U.S. had put their most beautiful national park That's what Kentucky would be. We are the most gorgeous national park as a whole. And so that outdoor destination, whether you want to go fishing, you want a bike ride, you just want to get out on a trail or, just take a little walk. One thing that, a lot of folks maybe up the way a little bit, maybe in Michigan, that really tout their fishing. Fishing is really kind of making a comeback, and I think it's going back to people just needing to check out a little bit, get off the screens, just slow down, get out on the water, and just take a breath.
Just something simple, right?
Yeah, something simple. I think we're all looking for it.
Keeneland rolls at the end of this week, obviously a beautiful destination for people from around the world, and that really signals the opening of the Derby season in Kentucky, and that really has to be what Kentucky may be most known for.
I would say so. That's internationally too. If anybody says, "Where are you from?" and you say Kentucky, and they're like, "Oh, the Derby,"
right?
Which is great because they know about us in some form or fashion. But like you said, Keeneland getting started, that really just kicks off, I think, that great sweet spot of time in Kentucky. Whether you want to get out to Keeneland, you just want to go tailgate, or you bring the kids over and they play, or you want to go inside and watch the races or get up on the rail. I think that's the great thing about Keeneland is that the races and the horses are so much more accessible than maybe some other places, and you can really get up close to the horse. But Derby, it's $4 billion impact.
Wow.
So it's nothing to, if you're not in Louisville, you may not be as impacted by traffic or visitors, but I mean, we're seeing within a 2-hour radius rooms that fill up and people come just because they're coming to Derby.
And, lots of other events I'm sure the state parks and other places, there are lots of other Derby events as well, so yeah.
Sure. About 2 weeks out from the Derby, your calendar, people could keep you full every minute.
All right, Commissioner, thanks for coming. We really appreciate it as always.
All right, thank you so much.
And thank you for joining us for this edition of Kentucky Newsmakers on WKYT. We'll see you bright and early on WKYT this morning, and we hope you make it a good week ahead.